well. So I'm just going to come down and grab and take her off mute. There's just a few people that I want to introduce you to that are actually in the call today. Sorry, I'm just going to, okay, there's Lauren there. I'm going to make you a presenter, Lauren. Okay, so coming back up here to our attendees, there's 3 people in particular, and there may be other people just like them, but these are the 3 that I largely work with, and that is Cindy and Trudy from the Department of Education in South Australia, and that is Lauren from Department of Education in Victoria. Because I'm in Victoria and I work with Southern States, I know these guys really well. I don't know if you guys want to come off mute and say hi.
Good morning, everyone. Lauren here from the Department of Education and Training in Victoria.
Hey, everyone. This is Cindy from South Australia and Trudy from South Australia as well.
All right, cool. So how long are you guys planning to be on the call today? For a while or?
A little while this morning, but potentially not this afternoon. Same here.
Okay. So as long as those guys are on the call, then they can sort of keep an eye on the chat for us and flag things to me as well. And if you have any sort of technical issues, you can reach out to them through the chat as well and until they disappear and go on and do what they need to do, because trust me, they're very busy people. All right, so that's the Teams call, right? So hopefully now you can sort of personalize it, make it a little bit more fun for yourself. So I'm going to drag you guys down to another screen. So when you see me looking down, it's because I'm probably looking at you guys. But when I look up, I've got a second screen up there, and that's where you see me like that. All right. Any questions so far about the call? No? All right, very good. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. We will be breaking for our first break at 11 o'clock. So if you wanted to set your timers now, as a matter of fact, I'm going to do mine. Hey Siri. Hey Siri. Set an alarm for 11 a.m.
I turned on your 11 o'clock alarm.
All right, she's great. So 11 o'clock to 11:30 will be our first break, and then our second break will be 1 to 1:30, and then we'll try to finish around somewhere between 2:30 and 3 o'clock. Okay, so that's in, look at, listen to these two. Unbelievable. All right. So welcome to the intro and getting to know each other. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to, after we finish this, we're going to talk about Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Hopefully some of you are familiar with that. This is the framework that Microsoft uses for our inclusive classroom. We're going to look at individualization and the Windows 10 ease of access. Okay. These will all become more clear to you as I start to unpack them. Then we're going to do a very, very brief introduction to Microsoft 365. We did a number of introduction to Microsoft 365 workshops for the different school transformation program cohorts. So if you are new to M365, Microsoft 365, and you're like, oh, I don't even know that. Kids, they're unbelievable. I don't know if you guys can hear them, but they're just running around like they're on drugs. Unbelievable. Sorry about that. Yeah, so if you are new to Microsoft 365, a lot of those have been recorded. So you can reach out to your school transformation program person at your school, who will then in turn reach out to us, and we can share those recordings with you, okay? But this is not going to be a day where we're going to spend looking at a lot of the basics, but you can access them later on. Then we're going to look at reading support and what the Microsoft stack can do for you in terms of reading support, writing support as well, math support. Then we'll look at speaking and listening, and then hands-on with what matters to you. Now, I only have you for a day. If I had you for 2 days, we could do a much, much deeper dive. But what I intend to do instead is steer you to find resources to find out yourself, okay? So, yeah, any questions about that? Someone's not off mute. I'm just going to mute you. Yeah, now, in terms of your mute and stuff, what happens is if you've got multiple people with multiple devices, you need to basically turn everybody's audio off except for one person and everybody's microphone off except for one person. So you choose which computer is going to be... Hey, stop it. They're unbelievable. They never do this. Yes, one person in the room has their sound and their microphone on, and everybody else can have it off. Okay, so that way you don't get feedback. Okie dokie. Very good. Any questions? If you have any questions, please come off mute. Hey, stop it. No? All right, very good. Let's keep moving then. All right, now we've done the Navigating the Teams call. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the school transformation program, because I would imagine that some of you, hopefully not all of you, but some of you have been sent here with very little knowledge about what's going on. I know schools. I was a teacher for a very long time. So I want to tell you a little bit about what you're a part of, and then we will, we'll get going. But the school transformation program is a whole school program, meaning that your school joins in its entirety. So we have cohorts all around the country. We have South Australian department cohort, we have Victorian department, New South Wales, etc. We have independence cohorts as well, which is a national group. And we all come together in different workshops run by different people, but basically it's the same thing for all the different cohorts, right? So it's free for schools, and we divide it up into some different segments. So I'm going to take you through this very quickly. We wanted to have lasting impact, right? So we, instead of just doing drop and run workshops, we developed a school-wide program, and we looked at what institutes effective professional development, and we knew that it has to be intensive and include follow-up and on-site support for teachers. There needs to be active learning opportunities for teachers, including practice, feedback, and reflection. We know that it needs to utilise the expertise of teachers in schools and departments and peak bodies, cultivating leaders and involving the teachers in the planning. And we need to provide structures that facilitate collaboration among teachers both within and across schools, all right, which is what we have, how we have tried to structure the STP, or the School Transformation Program. So basically what it looks like is we do a leadership day with your leaders, okay, and that's run by Travis Smith, who's our K-12 industry lead. So he talks to the principals, the deputy principals, some of your e-learning leaders, curriculum leaders, IT directors, etc., and talks about the vision for transformation for the entire school. The next thing is the e-learning leaders institute, and a lot of these have started around the country. This is where we upskill educators to support professional development. So basically the participants are the professional development facilitators back in their school. So we look at people like the e-learning leaders, digital leaders, curriculum leaders, etc. That's who we work with in those 2 days. The inclusive classroom, you're in the middle of it, welcome. So this is where we learn how Microsoft technologies can support students with learning and physical needs. And this is normally people like learning support leaders, teachers, teachers' aides, support professionals, people like speechies, OTs, etc., and any classroom teachers who have an interest in this space. The Microsoft 365 for IT Pros Day, this is for your techies, exploring how to best support schools to manage and deploy Microsoft technology on school devices. Because we learn that oftentimes teachers would get very excited about technologies, go back to their school, the techie doesn't get why they want it, why they need it, and won't switch it on and this kind of stuff. And a lot of techies are great, but we know sometimes they just need a bit of encouragement to do their job. So we have a 2.5 hour day for them. And then the other one, which I mentioned before, is the Microsoft 365 for Newbies Day, maybe called different things in your cohort, but basically it's the introduction, right? So if you think, hey, I would really like to get my head around some of the basics, then you can reach out to the person in your school who's responsible for the STP, and we can try and make those recordings available to you. Okie dokie. So that's what the STP looks like. Has anybody got any questions before we move on from that? No? Okay. By the way, there's 100 of you in here today, 96, including the 4 of us brings us up to 100. So there's 100 of us in here today, which is quite exciting. I'm really pleased. All right, so this is the Microsoft mission statement. Our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So the idea from Microsoft is that we, as a business, try to facilitate people to do good work, all right, using our technology. But the other thing that I've underlined there is every person. So we want to empower every person. So not just the mainstream, not just the average, but everybody. So that means that we take the accessibility story That is using technology to better access work, to better access learning, to better access whatever it is that the technology is trying to help you reach. We want to help those people as well. And that includes a lot of the kids in your class that you work with. So this is what it looks like. This is the Microsoft story, the Microsoft messaging around engaging every learner in a diverse K-12 classroom. Actually, I got it wrong slide. This is actually what it looks like where you guys are working. And that is, these are Australian stats. Up to 50% of instructional time can be lost managing students' needs, including assistive technology. Virtually 100% of schools in Australia have students with identified learning difficulties enrolled. Okay, and some of your schools are going to have more and some of your schools are going to have less, but basically we've all got them. About 20% of students in Australian schools require inclusive education support, all right, which is 1 in 5. And about a quarter, 25% of Australian students are from a language background other than English. So the issues that we are going to be dealing today, it's not about special schools, it's about, but it certainly includes them. It's not, I should say, it's not just about special schools, it's about special programs in mainstream schools, it's about undiagnosed, unfunded kids inside mainstream schools, it's about diagnosed and funded kids inside mainstream schools. It's about all of our students, really. And so that's why we use the term inclusive classroom rather than, you know, things like special needs, etc. Because what we're trying to do is show you how this technology can affect everybody positively, not just those that we think, in inverted commas, need it. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to, I want you to hover over the chat, and I would like you to tell me inside the chat your name, your role, and your school, and your city as well. All right, so again, come over, click on the little chat button, which is the little little speech bubble hanging around somewhere on your screen, and I would like you to please put in your name, your role, your school, and also your city and state that you're in. So go for it. Penny's asking me to remove my hat. Sorry, Penny, not with this hair. Hat's not coming off. Sorry about that. That's why I'm wearing a hat, because I'm work from home. All right, great. So you can see we've got people from all over the country here today. So take it as an opportunity to connect with one another. And if you see that someone is, you know, sharing something, either verbally or through the chat, and you resonate with them, feel free to reach out to them. And you can hover over and get their details, and you can reach out to them and email them and those kind of things as well. All right. So the idea of this is not just to work as a group from within your school, but also work across schools. Very good. All right. So we're on the countdown. We're already in less than an hour to go for this session. So for those of you that are counting down, good job. So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about the Microsoft Educator Center, and that is found at education.microsoft.com. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a browser, right? I'm going to bring my browser up here. Okay, I'm going to open up a tab here, and then I'm going to type in education.microsoft.com. Please notice there's no www. And this is the Microsoft Educator Center, which is our online portal for professional development. All right, so certainly we deliver face-to-face stuff, and certainly we deliver, you know, a combination of online and face-to-face, what we call hybrid learning, but we have an online portal for you. Okay, now the thing about this is, for everybody except for New South Wales, this will count as time from your teacher registration board for PD. All right. So if you have a certain amount of hours that you need to get up, you need to meet and you need to get up to, then you can use this as that, exactly that, because it meets the APSL standards. Now, New South Wales, sorry to say, we are told that you guys can use it as what's called teacher identified professional development, but you can't use it as your tier 1 PD. But the rest of us around the country, thank God, we can. So what that means is when you come to this, you need to make sure that you sign in. Okay, so again, education.microsoft.com, and you need to make sure that you sign in. You can use your school email address to sign in, your Microsoft 365, or you can create another account using another email address if you want, using an existing email address, Gmail, Outlook, whatever you want to use is fine. And you can sign in, okay, and then it will keep a record of everything that you do. All right. Now, I want to show you how it works. When we come over here to training, okay, I click on training and I come down here to courses. Now, what happens is if I am signed in, it will keep a record of everything that I've done, and I can print off an audit sheet and share that with my teacher registration board. For those of you in Victoria, the VIT, which is great. All right, so it'll say that the course that you did, the number of hours worth of PD, the date that you did it, etc. But what it will also do is it will keep a record of your progress, courses that you haven't started yet, courses that you have partially completed, and courses that you've totally completed. And you can also search for things by subject, by the age group that you're teaching, by the skills that you're developing, by the duration. You might be saying, I'm looking for 3 hours worth of PD just to get my numbers up, or maybe you're just looking for something for less than an hour, etc. All right, and even by product. Now, what it means is if we're looking for something like inclusivity, we can start to type the word inclusive. All right, so you can see there, I've started to type the word inclusive and I do search. And what happens is it's going to bring up all the courses that are focusing around inclusivity, okay, or at least a lot of them. So we've got things like student and school success. We've got Code Jumper, which is the coding for the blind. We've got Empower Every Student with an Inclusive Classroom, etc. Now, if I had signed in, it would be telling me which ones I've done, which ones I haven't done, which ones I'm partially through, etc. But I'm going to jump into this one, Empower Every Student with an Inclusive Classroom. You can see here it's telling me it's an hour course, right? And it's giving me the basic outline of the course, okay? And then when I start the course, it brings me in and I've got these series of modules that I do. And there are videos and articles and graphics and all kinds of things. And then when I finish the course, I do the quiz. Now, to get the points, or to get the sorry, I've gone blank for the word I'm looking for. To get the points, or to get the recognition, there it is. To get the recognition, then we need to make sure that we do the quiz. Okay, and you can go back and do the quiz as many times as you need to pass and get 80%. We don't mind you learning through the quiz. All right. So what would happen was you would do the introduction first, of course, then you would go and you would do this unit 2, which as you see there, it's got videos and other bits and pieces. Finally, we finish, we get the quiz, and then it will be recorded that we've got the points for that. Okay, or the recognition for that. So that's what that looks like in courses. Okay. Now, the other thing that we have is what's called learning paths. Now, what learning paths do is they grab our courses and they put them together in a linear fashion, saying that this builds on this, builds on this, builds on that. So for example, if I was going to look for inclusivity again, all right, and then I do a search, you can see I've got 3 learning paths here, right? One is the Inclusive Classroom Foundation. Okay, they're going to be our beginner. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see here that I've got a series of courses all together. All right, so it's 5 hours worth of PD, 5 individual courses. So I will get the recognition for those individual courses, and I will also get the recognition for the entire learning path. All right, and there's a number of different learning paths that we can access. We also have webinars and online events. Okay, so we have recordings and live events that are in there for you. They don't get recognition because we don't have quizzes and things, unless you want to keep some sort of document it yourself with your TRB, and you'll have to work out how you would do that. Lesson plans are up here as well. So we've got STEM lesson plans and some Minecraft stuff that exists up here. We've got teacher programs as well, the Microsoft Innovative Educator program, which you can access and become a member of. We've got student teacher programs. We've also got the Showcase School program. Products, things around specifically that Microsoft publish, and then resources as well. Resources are interesting because sometimes they are really, really good courses, but because they don't have a quiz, they're not considered a course. So they may still be very, very valuable to you, but you won't get recognition for PD for these ones, but they may still be very, very meaningful and purposeful for you. All right, so that is the Microsoft Educator Center. And this is where you can go back, and I'm going to steer you to a lot of these courses today. As we go through today, I'm going to at times going to say, oh, there's a really good course on that. Please explore this. And you know, I'll share links and that kind of thing as well. Any questions about the Educator Center before we move on? No? Aren't you a chatty bunch? This STP has been the most quiet little bunch I've had. Please feel free to come off mute and give me your opinions and other things as we go. All right, so here we go. Talking about equality versus equity. Now, you have probably seen this graphic before. It's not new, but I do love it. It really speaks to me about the difference between equality, being equal, and equity. All right, and the thing that I love about this one is whilst this little fella over here gets his second box so he can see, this guy over here actually gives up his box. So it's sometimes about people getting more, but others actually sacrificing things that they don't really need for the sake of equity as well. So yeah, very, very cool. Now, what I will do as well, by the way, guys, is I will share these slides with you. Someone needs to remind me by the end of the day so that you can actually get them, because oftentimes there's links in here inside the slides and the links will actually work. So yeah, remind me at the end of the day to share the slides with you. All right, so let's talk about the world's best-selling toy. Sold the most of any toy in the world. Excuse me. When I first came across this, I thought it was going to actually be Lego or something like that, but it's not. It's the Rubik's Cube. Now, let me tell you a story. There is a program, a computer program. Actually, step back even further. There are people in the world, and you may have seen the Netflix special. There are people in the world that can do the Rubik's Cube super fast. And basically, there's a group of them that can do it in less than 30 seconds. They can sit there with a Rubik's Cube and fly through it and you know, absolutely solve it in less than 30 seconds. Some of you, probably like me, can solve the Rubik's Cube, but not in a traditional way. So do you remember there used to be those kids that used to come to school and they would have the stickers all peeled off? I don't know if you can remember, this is me in the 80s, right? And when I was in high school and in primary school, and kids would actually bring it along and the stickers were all peeled and we knew that that's basically how they'd solved it. I used to get a screwdriver and I would pop this middle piece here and it would fall apart and then I would stack it all back together, and trust me, it took me more than 30 seconds, but that's how I used to put it together. But you do genuinely have these people that can solve it very, very fast, and they use a variety of different strategies. Some people have pattern recognition, okay? Other people memorize algorithms, etc. But again, it's really cool. They can do it in less than 30 seconds. But there's a Google programmer. I was told the story about this guy, or at least he was a Google programmer. I don't know where he is now. It's a few years old. But this programmer is totally blind, and yet he can solve the Rubik's Cube in less than 30 seconds. All right? So remember, if you lose sound or picture, leave the call and come back in, okay? Now, he can do it in less than 30 seconds, but he is totally blind, all right? Now, this is not a trick question. He's totally blind. If I gave him that Rubik's Cube right there, do you think he would be able to solve the Rubik's Cube in less than 30 seconds? Come off mute or throw it in the chat. What do you reckon? If I gave him that Rubik's Cube, okay, which is just your stock standard Rubik's Cube from the $2 shop, do you think he would be able to solve the Rubik's Cube? He's blind. Right. Exactly right. I'm liking what people are saying. No, he couldn't. He's blind. How is he going to identify the colors? So no, he can't solve the Rubik's Cube unless he's using some sort of special device, which may be something like this. Okay, so that's quite a beautiful looking device, isn't it? Now, what happens though, in inverted commas, for the rest of us who can't read Braille? If I started to market that Rubik's Cube, what's going to happen to people that can't read Braille? Throw that in the chat, or come off mute if you're feeling brave. How would you go with that Rubik's Cube? You see, you're supposed to put things in the chat, guys. There we go. People would have to learn to read Braille. Exactly, Karen. Good job. They would not be able to solve it. Good. It'd be a lot harder, not impossible. Well, you'd have to learn Braille first, and you'd also have to have a sensitivity in your fingers, which I don't know that I've got anymore, but yep, it would be very, very difficult, right? So basically what happens is when we have this device, thank you for all those answers. When we have this device, we're hitting the mainstream, but we're losing people on the fringes. But then when we have this device, we may hit some of the people on the fringes, but we're losing our mainstream and other sort of subgroups within the fringe, okay? But look at this device here, and hopefully you guys can see that through your screen. This is another kind of Rubik's Cube. Now, for those of you that can't see it clearly, what we've got there is we've got the colors are still there, but we've also got raised symbols, okay? So all the red have an X, all the green has a T, all the yellow has 3 dots. So you don't need to learn Braille, but neither do you need to be totally sighted. And when we think about these other two devices, someone that has problems with color differentiation and can't read Braille can't use this device, can't use this device, but they can use this device. All right. So what we're seeing there is what's called universal design. That is that we are looking to optimize this tool to reach the most people that we possibly can. Okay. Now I want to talk to you about my iPad. Now I have in my family we love our Apple devices, and I love to read on my iPad, right? And the iPad has some amazing assistive technology features built in, but basically the basic features to it is imitating what we've always known. Okay, so when we sit there, it's imitating a book, so that if I'm reading my iPad and I'm fully sighted and I am fully literate and I haven't got any challenges to print literacy, I can be reading that and using that. But if it wasn't for the assistive technology features in the device, it's more of the same for those that are facing challenges, right? So what we actually want is we want devices that are going to be applying universal design, that are going to have features, that are going to have systems that are helping the fringes whilst not alienating the mainstream. So when we think about assistive technology, we can have specialized devices or specialized technology for students, which is fine. But what that does is it brings with it a degree of stigma. So sometimes students don't want to stand out, especially the older that they get. They'd rather miss out than stand out, as you know. What we really want is we want assistive features and assistive technologies built into the devices that we all use, all right? So that we're being more inclusive with that. Now we have this thing, that's universal design, okay? Now we have this universal design idea which has come into education, which is called Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Now you can tell that that wasn't devised in Australia, because no one is going to call that UDL. If anyone can remember UDL, Spirit in a Can, but we are going to call it UDL. But Universal Design for Learning, it's really hard, guys, because I'm dropping gags and people, I don't know, no one's coming off mute. But anyway, Universal Design for Learning is the idea of taking our learning engagements and making them more accessible and making them more personalized to as many students as we can. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a video with you. I'm just going to reshare my screen and make sure that my audio is on. Yeah, I'm going to share a video with you about universal design rather than take you through and talk through it. I'm going to let someone better than me take you through it. So let's just let this video load. and then I'll play it for you. Now, hopefully some of you are going to have technology issues today. Your infrastructure is going to make the video lag, etc. You can access this video. There'll be a link at the end at www.cast.org. I'll throw that in the chat as well. So if your video slows down and you find it really annoying, you can access this video at www.cast.org. But anyway, let's see how we go.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal Design for Learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal Design for Learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in the classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways, allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
All right. Okay, so we don't have a lot of time to unpack UDL. All right, we'll do a little bit of it though. But please dig into www.cast.org and explore this if you don't have a framework that your school is applying in this, and you may have many. Okay, but this is what Microsoft has chosen. So we didn't obviously invent UDL. Instead, we've adopted it as the framework for our inclusive classroom story. So universal design for learning guidelines, we saw before the why of learning, which is the engagement. So for purposeful, motivated learners, we want to stimulate their interest and motivation for learning. That's something that you guys are doing already, 100%, whether you're using UDL or not, all right? And this is to do with the culture of the school, okay? That is motivating students, meeting them where they're at, etc. Then we talk about the what of learning, which is the representation, okay? So we want to present the information and content in different ways. And then lastly, we talk about the how of learning, which is the action and expression. So we want to differentiate the ways that students can express what they know so that they represent their learning back to us or make their learning known back to us, okay? And again, you can go to cast.org to access these graphics. Now, the Universal Design for Learning guidelines look like this, okay? So when we talk about representation here in the middle, when we talk about engagement over here, so it's about getting their interest. So we want to do things like optimize their choice and autonomy, optimize relevance, value and authenticity, minimize threats and distractions. Again, this is not so much about technology, but about the culture of the school and the culture of the classroom, all right? We want to make sure that we're setting goals and objectives. We want to vary the demands and resources to optimize the challenge, fostering collaboration and community inside the classroom and inside the school, etc. All right, and also looking at things like self-regulation for the student as well. So a lot of these ideas, okay, you will be already using in the space that you work. And people that come to this kind of workshop, you're across a lot of these basics. But when we look at representation, okay, which is when we're showing the student our learning, this is where it starts to get quite labor intensive for the teacher. So we want to offer the ways of customizing the display of information. So multiple means of displaying the information, alternatives for auditory information, okay, for students that are challenged by hearing or attention, etc. We want to also offer them alternatives for visual information. It's a lot for a teacher to take on. But when we look at language and symbols, we want to clarify vocab and symbols, clarify syntax and structure, etc. There's a lot here, and even down here into comprehension. And so too, when the student starts to demonstrate their learning or make their thinking known to us, it's things like varying the methods for response and navigation, optimizing access to tools and assistive technologies, using multiple media for communication, multiple tools for construction, etc., etc. There's a whole lot there for the teacher. All right. So key questions to consider when planning lessons are these. All right. Think about how learners will engage with the lesson. Does the lesson provide options that can help learners regulate their learning, sustain effort and motivation, engage and interest, the interest of all learners? All right. So a lot of work there to be done. Think about how information is presented, okay? Does the information provide options to help all learners reach higher levels of comprehension, understanding the symbols and expressions, perceive what needs to be learned, and so too, thinking about how learners are expected to act strategically and express themselves, all right? So there's a lot there. And when I was a teacher, if someone came along and started telling me that not only do I have to reach the 25 kids or the 35 kids in my class, but I also have to do all this stuff around UDL, this is exactly how I would be feeling, and maybe you're feeling that as well. But when we talk about the inclusive classroom from a Microsoft perspective, what we want to stress is that the technology can do a lot of the heavy lifting for these things here. Okay, so we are certainly not saying that the Microsoft Inclusive Classroom is going to touch all these points at all times. No way. But what we can do is we can assist you to hit a lot of these points. All right. And that's going to become clear to you as we move on through the day. So building a foundation for success. Inclusive education tools from Microsoft give more students personalized access to their curriculum, optimize educator time, and improve the learning outcomes. All right. So the students get more personalized access to their curriculum. We want to increase their independence and experience a reduction of stigma. Now, this is what we talked about before, that specialized technology for the students can make them stand out. And as I said, a lot of students, especially the older they get, would rather miss out than stand out. And that's why a lot of kids go undiagnosed, right? Because they don't start to act out, they actually start to fade away, right? They move into the back of the class, they start to keep quiet. You guys know how it is you work with these students, all right? So we want to give them greater independence, but also a reduction of stigma. And that can happen by using the same technology, the same devices, and the same software as everybody else in the classroom, okay? And so the technology becomes more and more invisible. But also we want to optimize educator time, okay? And then we saw that picture before of that, that teacher with his head in his hands, overwhelmed. We want to make sure that the technology is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you and a lot of the work for you. Now, I'm not going to pretend that there's not going to be an investment of time in the setup. Of course there will be. But once that investment is made, the technology will carry a lot of those points that we saw before from the UDL framework and the guidelines. It will do a lot of that for you, and the students learn how to switch these things on and off for themselves, all right? So we want to optimize your time. This is not about making life more difficult for you. But you educators using the technology are empowered to engage every learner. So there's times when the student will be using the technology to assist themselves, and there'll be other times where you're going to be using the technology to reach those students or to reach everyone. And then lastly, and of course over here, improving learning outcomes. That's the business of school, right? At the end of the day, that's what we want to see, right? Certainly we can look at, professional mandates and building the careers of the future. And certainly we can, talk about the moral mandates of making sure that students are included and feel connected to school and well-being and all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day too, improved learning outcomes is probably going to be pinnacle. People will pull their kids out of school if they're not learning. So we want to make sure that that's happening as well. But the last thing that I want to point out to you as well is that institutions are going to build reputations as positive places that promote equity and inclusion if they have the inclusive classroom available to their students. And that's what we're seeing, okay? We're seeing a lot of students, we're seeing a lot of schools that are starting to develop that reputation because of, of what they do for teachers. All right. And what they do for students, excuse me. So promoting independent learning. Accessible technologies help students with disabilities unlock their full potential by addressing a diversity of needs. So at Microsoft, the mothership is in the US, we're in Seattle. So our framework doesn't necessarily overlay with some of the disability frames within Australia, but this is the one that we've chosen to use. So we have these 6 different areas, and we're going to touch on all of them, some very briefly and some much more in depth. But the first one is learning. So things like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, we have tools that are going to support students in that space. Visual challenges, right? Whether it's low vision, blindness, color blindness, color differentiation, contrast differentiation can be in there in visual as well. Hearing, deaf and hard of hearing students, but also contextual hearing issues, right? So students can be in environments that are going to make it more difficult for them to hear and see. Mobility, things like cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy and amputation, etc. Not going to do so much in that space today, but there may be things that I point out that you may want to do a deeper dive. Neurodiversity, of course, autism, ADHD, ADD, seizures, etc. And mental health. Things like anxiety, depression, and OCD. I will admit today we will not be doing a huge deep dive in here, but Microsoft has got some stuff going on in that space. And then when we talk about the inclusive classroom, we're going to narrow that a little bit more and focus on these 4 different areas. All right, so we're going to look at reading support, writing support, math support, and then speaking and listening as well. All right, so whether that's because of the challenges that we just saw, other challenges, EAL, etc., we're going to explore how the Microsoft Stack can support you there. Any questions about what we have explored so far? Or any comments?
Hi, I've got a question.
Please.
I'm wondering if you can please share some links to the information on Microsoft's accessibility technologies for the different areas you just highlighted.
Yeah, we will as the day goes on, 100%. I'll definitely be sharing you the links, and I'll also be sharing you these slides, and a lot of the links that are inside the slides will be there as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Now, there was another course, and when you get these slides, you can access, there's a free course that was, I can't remember who made it, but it's a really, really nice understanding of universal design for learning. So if you wanted to do a deeper dive, when you get these slides, you'll be able to click here and you'll be able to access that link in there as well. All right. So yeah, deeper dive into UDL. And I do recommend that you jump in. All right, cool. Well, let's talk about shoes. What do you think, and I want you to put it in the chat, what do you think is the average shoe size for men? Okay, now I'm not being exclusive in any sort of sense. It's just I've chosen men, I could have chosen women, I could have chosen children. But what do you think is the average shoe size for adult men in the world? Go ahead and pop that down in the chat there. So we've got some 9s, 10s, some 11s, 9s, 10s. Good. 8s. Yep, cool. All right, well, the average shoe size for men in the world, believe it or not, is a US 10.5. So it's actually a 10.5. I would have, when I heard that first, I would have thought it's something like, 8.5 or something like that. And maybe that's because that's where I live. But no, definitely it's 10.5 is the world average shoe size. But what would happen if we started making size 10.5 shoes only? All right. So in other words, we're saying 10.5 is the average for men. So if I started making just 10.5 shoe sizes, right? And now we can be exclusive, and imagine that I'm making this for men, for women, for everyone, and I start making the size 10. What's going to happen, right? Basically, what we're going to find is we're going to find that most people are not going to be able to fit into their shoes. We would actually miss what most people need. And why? Because very few people are, in fact, the average. And this is what we call the myth of the average. Okay, now the myth of the average talks about the fact that when we talk about the average is conceptual. And the average is even, I dare say, it is a mathematical term. Okay, and it's not something that exists in the real world. Instead, what we need are various sizes, and let's face it, various styles as well. Why? Because we all have different needs. Now we have this thing called differentiation in education, and you may have heard of this term, right? And I'm going to be honest with you, when I used to hear the word differentiation, it used to upset me. And the reason why it upset me is coming back to that teacher with his head in his hands saying, oh my goodness, you're telling me that not only do I have to reach the majority of my students or the bulk of my students through this program, now I have to start creating different learning engagements for kids. I have to do specific worksheets. I have to, and the idea of differentiation was, as a teacher, and I was a primary teacher for a very long time, I believed that differentiation was a bit of a myth. And I read a very good article on it from a guy from the University of Adelaide once about what he called the myth of differentiation. And that is a lot of, the emperor has no clothes. And a lot of teachers are pretending to differentiate or giving the appearance to differentiate. I'm not saying that's true of everyone, but a lot of them are, because they don't have the skills to offer differentiation and what the students need and how to meet those needs. And also they don't have the time, let alone the energy. And so I used to get quite upset with the idea of differentiation. And like a lot of people, I sort of played the game, right? And pretended that I was. It meant that I, as a teacher, was responsible for making sure that all my lessons met all my kids' needs. All right. And as I said before, here's another teacher in that exact same place who has time to differentiate. I barely had time to do the basics of my job, let alone create special resources and special learning engagements for all the kids that needed them. All right. And I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be done. I'm not saying that there wasn't a mandate for it to be done. What I'm saying was I didn't have the time or the skills. That was my problem with differentiation. Now, there's another word that you may have heard thrown around, and that is personalization. Okay, and personalization, while seemingly on the surface the same as differentiation, is somewhat different because personalization doesn't put the onus on the teacher, but it puts the onus on the learner. The student personalizes their own learning or their own engagements. So the onus is no longer on the teacher, but on the student. Now, sure, the teacher has to facilitate personalization, but ultimately the teacher doesn't decide what this looks like. And so this is one of the big differences between differentiation and personalization. And on the surface, they may seem like they are the same in the same amount of work. But again, one is putting the onus on the teacher to create, and one is putting the onus on the student, and instead the teacher just facilitates. So that's the difference between personalization and differentiation. Now at Microsoft, we have taken the term personalization. That's actually where we're coming at with this whole inclusive classroom message. How are we going for time, guys? 10:40. We've got 20 minutes till break, so counting it down. Now, I want to introduce you to a tool that can support you in personalization. Now, I'm going to make this really clear again. Nothing that I'm going to present to you today is going to solve all your issues and solve everything for every child, but we are going to be able to assist, and we are going to be able to make life easier for you and for your students, at least for some of them. We have this thing called the Ease of Access Center, or just simply Ease of Access. All right. And that lives here in our settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop sharing, and I'm going to start sharing again, but this time I'm going to share my screen down the bottom here. All right, because I'm going to show you how to find Ease of Access. All right, now Ease of Access lives. Can you guys see when I bring that up? Can you see my my menu? Did that just pop up? Can someone come off mute and tell me if you can see my menu?
Yes.
Yep, great. Okay, so you may have a search bar here, or you can also hit the Windows button and on your keyboard. And sorry for Mac users for this part of our session. This is only for the Windows 10 users, but we will come back to a lot more for you guys later on. But when I click on that little button there, I've got my settings wheel here, okay? And when I click on my settings wheel, what it does is it opens my Windows settings. Now, another way that I could find that is by opening this here, okay, this little search bar, and I can start to type settings, and that will open it as well. All right. Now you can see over here, I've got Ease of Access. All right. And my dog's growling in the background. Ease of Access lives right here. Now, what Ease of Access does when I click on it is everything that I need, or everything that is available, I should say. I'm just going to drag you guys up here so I can see you as I present. There we go. Everything that is available to me on a Windows device to make my device more accessible or to personalize it lives in the one spot. Okay, so once upon a time, those of you may remember, what used to happen was we used to go over here to change the sound, and then we used to go over here to change the visual stuff, and then we used to go over here to change our mouse settings, and we used to go, okay, what Microsoft have done for the sake of personalization is they have brought it down into the one section, okay, one space. Now you think about the way that you personalize your devices now. Okay, I just turned 50 last year, and my vision is going, right? I never used to wear glasses, and I'm still not in a place where I remember to take my glasses, especially restaurants. I sat at a restaurant last night for my daughter's 14th birthday, and I'm holding the, like an old man, I'm holding, the menu like 5 feet away from me trying to read it, because I'm still not in the habit of bringing my glasses. But what's great about my iPhone or my Android phone or even my Apple Watch is that I can actually set the font size to be huge. Okay, and people look at my phone and laugh that the text is just so big, and I'm constantly scrolling through, right, because the text is so big. But nevertheless, I'm able to personalize that device so that forgetting my glasses is not an issue. Okay, so too with my iPad with reading. All right, I do a lot of reading. I've got my Kindle and I've got my iPad. I've got my Kindle app on my iPad. I do a lot of reading through that. Being able to set the spacing, being able to set the font size and all that kind of stuff is really important. But what happens is when we get to PCs and when we get to our Macs and things like that, we often don't steer the kids or steer their families or even ourselves to where we can make these changes. All right. So I used to actually share this at the end of the workshops, and I've realized just more recently that I really need to be sharing this at the beginning, because this is the starting place. All right, which is personalizing the devices that the kids are on. Mac users, iPad users, Chromebook users, there are setting spaces that you can explore as well. But sorry, that's a little bit outside my skill set. Instead, we're going to focus on Windows 10. So when we're in ease of access, you can see here, we've got 3 major categories. We've got vision, we've got hearing, and we've got interaction. Okay, so things that are going to increase my use visually will live in this space. Auditory will over here, and my interaction live over here. Now, what that looks like, let's come first into display, which is where we are. And the thing I want to point out to you first and foremost is, please notice that it is not saying to me 11-point font, 14-point font, and having to type it in, which is once upon a time what we used to have to do. Instead, it's just a slider. Right, so the student, you can steer the student and say what works for you, and you may want to do this with them the first couple of times until they get used to it, but after a while let them know where ease of access lives and let them set it up themselves. But it's just a slider, okay, and that slider can go up and down. I'm seeing what it looks like up here. I'm not having to switch out and switch back and check it and come back, and then when I've got it where I want it to be, I hit apply. Bang, and now everything is much bigger. And you know what, for what it's worth, I'm glad I did that, because that's actually better for me as well. Now, that's my text, but I may want to change the size of the apps, right? And on displays and other things as well. And I can change that in here as well, okay? And you can just go in, make it bigger and smaller according to the number. Do I want to make everything brighter? Or do I want to make everything dimmer? Now, for some visual challenges, that's actually a game changer. So again, being able to do that right inside and seeing it happen in real time is key. For people that are, some of the students that would see things like attention issues and things like that, we may want to turn the animations off, okay? We may want to turn the transparency off, and we also maybe want to automatically hide the scroll bars, the scroll bars that come up along the side here, hiding those as well. We also may want to turn notifications right down. So notifications that appear on the screen may become a distraction. We want them to be quick, or we want students to be able to see them and give them time to see them. So we may want to turn them up, okay? And also, do we want to turn desktop background image off, right? Because that can be a distraction. And there's other personalizing of background and other things in there as well. But you can see my display is largely done in here. Now, if you're missing it, there's related settings over here. Okay, now the mouse pointer, now you see my mouse pointer, right? I know the kind of, because I do a lot of displays, and also the level of people that I work with need to be able to see my pointer. So I can change my pointer size from here. I can change my pointer color. All right, I've got multiple colors. I've got suggested colors. Teal is a nice one when we're doing demonstrations. We can also change the touch feedback on our device, etc. Same too with the cursor. Right? Sometimes we want the mouse to be big, but we don't want the cursor to be big, or vice versa. And they can all be changed in there as well. We've got the magnifier as well. Okay, so you can hover over parts of the screen. I won't pretend to be right across this tool, but those of you that need it, go in and explore and steer your kids to it as well. Color filters as well. Okay, so turning on our color filters, we can invert the colors. We can also remove the colors. That is, it becomes grayscale. And we can have grayscale inverted, which is going to be really useful for some of your kids. And some of it, you know, it's not necessarily that you've heard this from a speech or an OT or something like that. Instead, it just may be trial and error and saying to the student what works for you and letting them personalize their device. All right. We've even got color blindness filters, which is awesome. A lot of people don't even know they're there. All right. So 2 different kinds of red, green, and 1 kind of blue, yellow. All right. So you can make the device or limit the device when it's using those subtle greens and reds to be much more differentiated. All right. High contrast is in there as well. Okay. So being able to turn on high contrast, have a look at this. Give it a minute. There we go. So that's going to actually bring the colors and the highlights and things like that much better for some kids. I'm going to turn that off. Just give me a moment because I'll get distracted. But it's all about personalizing. Did someone have a question? Someone came off mute? Nope. Okay. Narrator is in there as well. Now, you may have visually impaired students that are using their own narrator. They may be using something called JAWS. JAWS is marketed and sold by Vision Australia. Okay. Great tool. I know visually impaired people that are using it. It's a great tool. Narrator inside Windows 10 is definitely now on par. Once upon a time, you used to have to buy, you know, special software, JAWS and other screen readers. Nowadays, Narrator is actually on par with JAWS, and so you may want to introduce that to some of your students. But if they feel better with JAWS, it's what they've been using, and they're getting backing from Vision Australia, etc., by all means use that as well. So too in hearing, we can make our device easier to hear. We can also turn on mono audio, and that's amazing sometimes when we've got headphones on, for example, and we can't hear in one ear. If it's coming through stereo, we're missing half the sound. So being able to do that. Also turning on visual alerts for audio. Turning on, oh, I just stopped sharing, I think. Excuse me. Yeah, so doing things like turning on visual alerts for audio. So, you know, we're used to hearing the dings and the dongs. Having that actually as a visual alert's really key. Things like setting up speech and dictate across Windows 10. The dictate features in Windows 10 are phenomenal. I'm going to show you and spend some time on it in Office a little bit later, but that's in there as well. Keyboard alternatives, mouse alternatives, and also eye control. So for those that can't physically interact with their device, eye gaze technology is now the interface. You do need specific technology to be able to do that, but the interface is now directly built into Windows 10 as well. So if you've got students that are possibly using eye gaze technology, you can draw them to the fact that it's there. All right, so that's the Ease of Access Center. Now what I'm going to do is just for our last few minutes, all right, so I'm probably going to give you about 5 or 6 minutes, and I'll put a timer up on the screen as well, is I'm going to give you time to go and have a bit of a play with the Ease of Access Center. Now remember how to find it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Remember how we find it. We hit the Windows key on our keyboard, or we find the Windows key down here. We come into settings, and then once we're in settings, I'll just take us back. Once we're in settings, we click on Ease of Access. All right, and that's how we get in there and play with that. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes, a little bit of hands-on time to play around with that. And yeah, I'll give you guys a shout. Just keep your computers on, and I'll give you a shout in 5 minutes, and then we're going to get ready for our morning tea break. Any questions, come off mute and I'll help you out. Yeah, Sarah, you're on a Mac. You can do a search through your favorite search engine and just see, look for accessibility settings on the Mac, and there may be videos and walkthroughs and other things that can take you, take you through that. But we are Microsoft, and so we play predominantly in the Windows world. Okay, folks, what we're going to do now is we're going to take our break. Okay, so that means we're all coming back at 11:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So please take this time to walk away from your machine. I really encourage you to sort of get up and move around. Don't sit in front of your machine and play around. That's just my suggestion. And yeah, we'll see you back in just over half an hour. And then we're going to start to look at the basics of Microsoft 365, a very simple introduction. And then we're going to play around more with some of our inclusive classroom features. And definitely we'll be including people on Macs as well in that part of our day. So I'll see you guys all in just over 30 minutes.
Here we go, Lucky 13.
Just me and my shadow strolling down the avenue. Me and my shadow, not a soul to tell my troubles to. And when it's 12 o'clock, we climb the stair. We never knock, because there's nobody there. Just me and my shadow, all alone and feeling blue. And my shadow, not a soul to tell my troubles to.